is an enticing menu available. I'm now going to pass you over to Sheikh Abdur Raheem Green. Thank you. This will be followed by a hot Indian supper. So hopefully we're all ready to start at the end of the session. And I believe there is an enticing menu available. I'm now going to pass you over to Sheikh Abdur Raheem.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره. We begin by praising Allah, the Creator. We praise Him, we seek His help, and we ask for His forgiveness. And we take refuge with God from the evil of ourselves and from the evil consequence of our evil actions. Whoever God guides, no one can misguide, but whomsoever God leaves to go astray, no one can guide. And I testify that God alone is worthy of worship and that Muhammad is His servant and messenger. Okay. Is someone playing with the volume, because it's so much better without the hiss? Yeah, can you get that hissing sound off? Possible? No? It sounds like there's a pit of snakes over there. Okay, that's a lot better. Because I can project my voice if I need to. Yeah. Now I know some of you are a bit worried tonight, and you think that we're going to try and convert you to Islam, and I'd like to assure you that that is, of course, the case. We would be. There's the snakes come back again. Yeah. What's going on? So seriously, I say from the bottom of my heart, that we would be more than delighted for alhamdulillah, and we'll be so happy. And we honestly really do sincerely, from the bottom of our hearts, love for you what we love for ourselves. And I passionately, really truly love this religion that God has blessed me with, Islam. And I really mean it, that I would love for you the same thing. But honestly, my main objective tonight is not to try and convert you to Islam. That's not my main objective. My main objective really is simply, I hope that by the end of tonight, you will have a clearer understanding what Islam is really about. That's all I want to do. And I don't see how there can be any harm. I would be more than happy to be able to understand anybody's way of thinking, why anyone has a worldview, however objectionable I may find it. I would love to understand, why do they see the world the way that they do? Why do they think the way that they think? Why do they behave the way that they do? And that understanding can only enrich us as communities. And I think that's very important, because there's a saying that I really believe this is a very true saying. It's a cliche, but it's true. People are afraid of the things they don't understand. People are afraid of things they don't understand. And so when we can build bridges of understanding, the fear dissipates. So that's my intention. My intention tonight is simply to try and help you to understand what Islam is really about. Now, here's my first challenge. And actually not my first challenge, it's a challenge for all of us. And the first challenge that faces us is this: that there is a big confusion between Islam, the religion. So there is this religion called Islam that was essentially preached by a man who lived in Arabia just over 1,400 years ago. Although Muslims believe Islam, as I will explain later, is actually the primordial religion. We believe it is the religion of all humanity from the beginning of humanity. We believe it was the religion of Adam, it was the religion of Abraham, it was the religion of Moses, of Jesus. We believe all of those prophets taught Islam. And that may sound confusing now, but hopefully I will explain it by the end of the evening. But Islam in a specific sense, that the book that was given to Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, the Quran, This is 1,400 years old. So that's the religion. But Islam is also, the word Islam is connected to a civilization, an empire, to culture, and it has become intermingled as it does. In the same way, by the way, not long ago, Europe used to be called Christendom. It didn't used to be called Europe. It used to be called Christendom. And Europeans, by and large, identified themselves as being Christian. And Europe was identified as being the land of Christianity. Even though there were different countries, different nations, different kings, different rulers, they had this appellation or this label that they were called and referred to themselves as Christendom. So it's very similar. But also, of course, within Christianity, within Hinduism, with Buddhism, within many religions, you have a mixture of cultures. And part of the confusion is Muslims themselves are very confused and have a very confused approach to their culture and their religion. Most Muslims think that their culture is Islam. Most Muslims think their culture is Islam because Islam is so intimately woven in to their culture. It's such a part of their everyday life. They think that the things that they practice are Islam. And it may happen that the things that they practice have nothing to do with Islam. They're just cultural practices. Sometimes those things may agree with Islam because Islam did not come to remove from any culture good things. Islam accepts from every culture good things. And there are some things that people have retained from their culture that actually contradict Islam altogether. So they actually go against the teachings of the religion. But some people imagine that what they follow from their culture is Islam. I'm reminded of a story, and as far as I know, this is a true story, okay? That there was a man in London who, having spent some time with the Muslims and talking to them, was actually very attracted by what he saw and what he heard of the religion. But he had one concern. And he said, listen, I really like Islam. I like the sound of it. I like the sound, but I've got one question. Is it, if I'm a Muslim, do I have to eat curry every day? Right? And because that was his experience. He never saw the people he was with eat anything except that. And he thought that this was part. I've actually seen religious texts in some mosques talking about how the Prophet Muhammad used to share curry with his companions. There was no curry in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, believe me, right? But that's the word they used. It was in a religious text, okay? Because they translated their experience into it, okay? And so, not that most of us have any problem with curry at all, but the problem here, the issue here is what I'm trying to illustrate is the confusion between culture and religion. And I think one of the things we want to do is to be able to separate, at least conceptually, those two things. Now, what does the word Islam mean? I wonder, does anyone know what the word Islam means? Does anyone actually know, and who's not a Muslim actually? But does anyone non-Muslim have any idea what the word Islam means? Does anyone know what it means? Shall I pick on someone? How about you? You've got a nice smile, beautiful smile. What does the word Islam mean? Have you any idea? Not a clue. Not even a guess. How about the gentleman over there studiously avoiding looking at me? What's the... No idea. Seriously. You must have heard something on the TV or the... Does anyone have any idea? No? Okay, well, I was hoping someone would say that, you see. The word Islam is it peace? Okay, that's good. And often that's what you hear mentioned. The word Islam means peace. And actually, interestingly, in Arabic, Every Arabic word comes from a root, and the root is usually 3 letters or 3 consonants. In written Arabic, you don't have vowels. The vowels are displayed by dots and lines, but in original written Arabic, there are no vowels. So 3 consonants, okay? And the consonants here is S or salam, okay, which means, one of the meanings of that is actually peace. But actually, the word Islam itself does not mean peace. It actually means submission. Now, I might have lost the plot right from now, because let me ask you a question. When I say the word submission, to most of you, the word submission, the English word submission, generally when I say it, do you think that has a negative or a positive feeling when I say submission? Yeah, almost definitely it's negative. And you'll find almost universally in Western society, if you talk about submission, surrender, it's negative. Why? Because we are taught in the West that we live in free societies. We are a free country. Have you ever heard someone say, this is a free country, I can do what I like, it's a free country? Yeah? We often say that, right? Okay? So the West has this idea, this concept of freedom that it talks about a lot. So obviously in that context, it's like, well, why would I want to submit? I have freedom. It's a negative thing. So I want us to think about this concept of submission, right? So can anyone give me a simple definition of submission? You know, if you open the Oxford English Dictionary, how they might explain the word submission. When you are submitting, what are you doing? Can anyone tell me? There's a lot of audience participation here. Okay, giving power to something, right? Okay, that's good. I would reduce it to, how about giving in? When you submit, you give in. Yeah? You surrender, you give in. I think that's a good definition. Submission means to give in. Let's think about this idea of giving in, because my contention with you tonight is that we all live in a state of submission to someone or to something. In fact, my contention is that you can't avoid it. Right? So let's think about this idea of giving in. Now, hands up who, when they were at school, had to wear a school uniform. Right? Keep your hands up. Right? If you liked wearing your school uniform. Who liked wearing the school uniform? Yeah, there's always a few. There's always a few, right? Huh? The teacher. Yeah, there you go, right? So most of you didn't like wearing your school uniform, right? And even the ones who kept their hands up, let's put it this way, right? Friday night, you want a new outfit for Saturday. Do you walk into the shop and see your school uniform and say, well, that's what I'm going to wear this evening, right? So most of us, we didn't like wearing our school uniform, right? So then why did we wear it? If we didn't like doing it, why did we do it? Come on. You were told to. Thank you very much. So what is it when you do something that you don't really want to do because you were told to? What have you done? You submitted. You gave in. Right? I thought we lived in a free country. So what is it when you do interesting, right? You don't really want to do in fact, if you think about it, we give in all the time. You can't park your car anywhere you like in the middle of the street. In fact, let me tell you, here's a vision of freedom. Yeah? Did anyone see that film Easy Rider? Yeah, you seen it? Yeah? I won't do the music, yeah? But you have these guys going around America on their Harley Davidsons, yeah? We're going to do that. Those great American beasts of motorbikes, right? And here's a vision of freedom, riding out America and you're with the wind blowing through your hair, right? You see, I probably look like one of those guys, right? Okay? So you're on your Harley, but the only problem is that actually would be, of course, illegal in England, because you can't ride a motorbike without a helmet. I mean, that's a vision of freedom, but you can't do it. So what does freedom mean then? I mean, no one is free to do whatever they like. In fact, we submit all the time. In fact, I would say that it is unavoidable. In fact, I would actually challenge anyone to think of a single moment in their entire life when they are not giving in to someone or to something. And you can't, because by the nature of you being a human being, you have to eat, you have to breathe, you have to drink, right? Your body has to function. You have to get, however much you may not want to, you have to, right? So this is a natural condition for human beings. True freedom, absolute freedom doesn't exist. You know, it's really just propaganda. Okay? So what do we mean freedom? What does it mean? No, we find in reality, and this is not a bad thing, it's just the reality. When human beings live together, the moment you get two human beings, just two, you have to start making some type of compromises, because that's what society is about. Society is about limiting the rights of, or the freedom of the individual for the benefit of society. And the whole discussion about civilization and society and what society is and what defines society and how free we should be and shouldn't be all revolves around this dilemma. The basic premise we all agree, and everyone would agree, it's good for us to be free. We'd all like to be absolutely free and have no restrictions. But we acknowledge that in living together as human beings, there has to be restrictions on the individual's freedom in order to protect society. But here's the question. Where are the lines drawn? Where should the freedom of the individual end in order to protect society? And that's the big question. That's what's being asked right now, today. Where is a freedom? Where do we restrict the freedom of the individual to protect society? And the debate goes on about that. Okay? Now, let's go back to Islam. We can understand that we all live in a state of submission. And I would propose that, as far as I've figured out so far, you submit out of three things. And this is what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about involuntary submission, which is the submission that takes place because you are a creature, you have to eat, you have to breathe. So no, I'm talking about voluntary submission, right? It takes three forms. Number one, either you submit out of love. You submit out of love. Anyone who has kids, anyone who has a wife or a husband, hopefully, will understand the concept of submitting out of love. I may not want to do the washing up, but I know my wife has a really hard time. She's had a long day with the kids, whatever it may be, right? She needs some help. So I love my wife. So what do? I'll do something. I don't want to do it, but I'll do it out of love. I may do something for my kids. Maybe I don't really like, mountain biking. Well, actually, I love mountain biking, but maybe I don't love it. But you know what? I'll get on a bike and I'll go up the hill with my son because he loves it. Right? There's something, I give up something. I submit because I love my son, I love my daughter, I love my wife, I love my parents, or whatever. So this is an example of submitting out of love. Now, sometimes we also submit out of fear. I'm afraid what's going to happen to me if I don't follow the rules. If I park on that double yellow line, I will get clamped. And I'll be charged £110, and they'll tow me away, which will be another £300. That's what it is in London anyway, right? So I'm afraid of the consequences. So I don't break the rules out of fear. I may think they're stupid rules. I don't even understand why there's a double line there. It looks like it wouldn't do anything, me parking there. But that's the rule, and I'm afraid. What's going to happen to me if I break it? It's perfectly normal. And another reason we submit, or another cause of submission, is out of just intelligence, out of reason, out of knowing that this is the right thing to do. It makes sense. Right? There is a rational good reason for it, and I don't feel like it. Maybe it doesn't suit my desires, but I know that that's the right rational thing to do. I, as yet, haven't thought of a fourth one. So those are the three reasons, or the three sections through which people submit to things, right? Now, what has this all got to do with Islam? Of course, the word Islam means submission, but submission in a specific sense. In a specific sense. Islam actually means a willing submission to the will of God. So the factor here is God, is the creator. Now, Muslims believe our faith. You know, I was listening to some atheists on YouTube the other day, and they gave a definition of faith that I simply couldn't agree with and I couldn't relate to as a Muslim. And they were saying, you know, faith means believing something unbelievable without any proof. And I don't see faith like that at all. I believe, and most Muslims accept, that there are very sound, rational reasons to believe that the universe has a creator. They may be simple reasons, and some atheists may argue they are too simple, but they are certainly rational. There is nothing irrational about believing that an organized, systemized universe has an organizer and a systemizer. Because our common experience as human beings, common sense, is that when we see things working according to laws, when we see things working according to patterns, when we see things having a function, we know that someone has imposed order and function and patterns and systems upon that thing. That's why if I was walking along in the desert of Saudi Arabia and I found a mobile phone lying in the sand, even though the basic raw materials of a mobile phone are exactly the basic raw materials you would find a lot of in Saudi Arabia. Sand and oil. Plastic comes from oil. Glass and silicon comes from sand. Throw in a few precious metals, right? And you have the basic components of a mobile phone. Yet I wouldn't walk along and pick up a mobile phone and say, look at this. It's an amazing product of billions of years of random events. The sun shone, the wind blew, the oil bubbled, the lightning struck, the camel trod, and there I have a mobile phone in my hand. Random events formed it, right? Instinctively, a human being can see that this is ordered, this is made, this is created, there is intelligence behind it. And in fact, when we look at our universe, we see lots of evidence of such order. We see that the conditions exist in our universe are so finely tuned for the existence of life. It is hard to understand how this could be a random event. Now, scientists may offer this explanation and that explanation. That's fine. But ultimately, it's a rational conclusion to come to. There's nothing irrational about that. An organized, systemized universe has an organizer and a systemizer. That's entirely rational. And it's also rational to conclude that the one who created this universe must be different from the universe. It must be different. Because if the creator of the universe was the same as the universe, then you'd actually just have more universe. And you wouldn't have an answer to the implicit question, what brought this universe into existence and created it and organized it? So it's a very simple, rational conclusion that the creator of the universe must be different from the universe. So if the universe is finite, the creator should be infinite. If the universe is needy, the creator should be self-sufficient. And it's hard to imagine how you could have more than one self-sufficient, eternal creator. The point being here is that the conclusion that the universe has a creator who is unique, who is transcendent, who is different from the universe, who is the creator of it, is actually a very rational conclusion to come to. It's not irrational. That means that we have a belief that is not unbelievable at all. In fact, the proposition that this is all some random event and just came from nothing is actually itself, that is unbelievable. We don't find anything in our human experience to make us believe something comes from nothing, let alone that order could spontaneously arise out of chaos. This is an irrational proposition. And that's the basic belief of a Muslim, that the universe has been created by one God who is transcendent, who is unique, who is different from the creation. So it's a very rational belief. And similarly, when the Muslim says we believe in the Quran and we believe in the prophethood of Muhammad, we have really good reasons to believe that the Quran is from God and that Muhammad is the prophet of God. It's not just merely just a belief. No, there are some reasons. There are some compelling reasons. Some of them are historical, some of them are scientific, but the reasons are there. I suggest if you pick up one of the Qur'ans, I think there's been some Qur'ans distributed. There's a very nice section in the back of the Qur'an, those Qur'ans that talk about it. The point that I want to make anyway is that we have rational reasons for our faith. Rational reasons to believe there is a God, rational reasons to believe this universe has a creator, and that God has given guidance to human beings about how we should live our life. And I think actually we are in desperate need of guidance from the Creator. We are in desperate need of it. In fact, human beings have consistently shown that they have failed to develop a really effective pattern of living from their own intellect. And that we are in need of a pattern of living that comes from the supreme intellect, the one who has created all of this universe. And that's the simple rational basis of the idea that we should submit and surrender ourselves to the will of God. God has given us guidance. And as I said, we believe this is the basic teaching of all the prophets. We believe that Abraham taught that there is one God, one transcendent creator, and that we should follow God's commandments. Right? Let me give the example from the life of Abraham. And anyone who is familiar with the Judeo-Christian tradition knows this story. In the Islamic tradition, the son was Ishmael or Ismail, and in the Judeo-Christian tradition, it was Isaac. But whoever it was is not what is most important. The most important thing is Abraham's attitude. And this is something I really want to emphasize a little bit, okay, because I hope it will come useful later if you have some questions. Abraham, as you know, was told by God to sacrifice his son. To sacrifice his son. Now the point being here is that there is no way to rationalize that. I mean, I could say, you could ask me, why don't you Muslims eat pork? And maybe I could give you a rational reason why, pork has this disease and that disease and it's bad for your diet and, whatever. And you could ask me about all sorts of things in Islam. Is it true you Muslims this? Is it true Islam that? And maybe we could develop some rational arguments. But thinking back to Abraham, there is the only rationalization of this is God told him to do it. And if God tells you to do something, you should do what God says. And actually, that's why Abraham actually is the paradigm. He is truly the one who submitted to God on a very profound level. Because at the end of the day, that's it. If God is telling me to do something, whether I understand it or not, as long as I know it's from God, and that's the important thing. Am I sure this is from God? But if I am sure it's from God, I should obey God. This is the willful submission to God. Out of love, out of fear, out of intellect, knowing that God is the most wise. Maybe God understands some things that I don't. So Abraham is the paradigm. But Moses also, who would argue that Moses taught there is one God? Read the first commandments. If you read the first commandments, it's very clear that thou shalt love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your might, with all your might. And you shall not worship anything along with God. You shall not make any graven image of anything in the heavens or the earth or the sea, and you shall not bow down and you shall not worship them. A very clear exposition of the belief in a transcendent creator who is to be obeyed. The commandments are about obeying God. Deuteronomy is about the laws through which human beings, or specifically the children of Israel, should worship God. So conceptually, Moses taught this belief that there is one God and that we should submit to God. Muslims believe that all the prophets, including Jesus, taught exactly the same thing. According to the Gospels, Jesus is supposed to have said, I have not come to change the law, but I have come to complete it. And whoever changes one dot or one iota of the law will be considered least in the kingdom of heaven. This is what Jesus said. What Paul made of it is a different discussion. But this is what Jesus said. Right? And Jesus had a God who he worshipped. He said to his disciples, I go unto my Father and your Father, my God and your God. So Muslims ask the question, how could he be God if he had a God? He was subservient also himself to God, worshipping God, praying to God. He was a needy, created, temporary, finite human being. And the same with Muhammad. So we don't look at these prophets as people bringing different religions. They brought the same basic idea. Okay, maybe some of the details of the do's and the don'ts, maybe they were different. But the basic idea, the core concept is the same. Their basic message is the same message. And that's what we think Islam is. As I said, the primordial religion, the religion of all the prophets. Not a new religion, not something new. Something actually that has always been taught throughout history. Okay? Now, I just want to I would like us to do a mind exercise. Use our imagination, okay? And I would like us to think about a scenario. It goes back to the concept that we were talking about, submission, okay? Imagine today, okay, that we actually came today to a slave market. There was a time when slave markets existed. Actually, some of the great cities of this country, at least Bristol, was built upon the slave trade. In fact, there are whole chasms and alleyways under Bristol where slaves used to be stored. Bit of hidden history. Okay? So there was a time, not long ago, ancient Rome, of course, and throughout most of ancient history, slavery was very common. You could go to a marketplace and just like you bought some ice cream and a packet of cornflakes, you could buy a slave. And you could do anything with that slave. It's up to you. It's your property. It belongs to you. Maybe some countries introduce some laws. In the British Empire, later on in Jamaica, for example, I was just in Jamaica recently, and I was studying about the slave trade there. Very late in the history of Jamaica, the British Empire introduced some laws to restrict how slaves should be treated. But before that, it was open season. You could do anything to a slave that you wanted. So let's imagine that. Let's imagine today we've come to a slave market, right? A place where you can buy and sell a human being. Now, I want you to really imagine this, okay? Just imagine it. Maybe it's a bit of a civilized slave market, but if you can have that, but it's a slave market as it is. Now, maybe you are thinking that, imagining now that, you've come here to buy a slave. You got it wrong. I want you to imagine you are the slaves. You all here today have been bought to be sold into slavery. And I'm going to now bring, imagine it, some people who are going to buy you. That means they can take you away and they can do whatever they like with you. Imagine it. Please try and imagine it. If you are imagining this, then you will be quite anxious. You'll be nervous. You'll be thinking, I wonder what the person who is going to purchase me is going to be like. Will they treat me well? Will they beat me? Will they kill me? Will they put me to work? What will they do? What will my master or my mistress be like? Imagine. And you'll be dreading the possibilities. Now I'm going to paint for you the worst case scenario. Right? The worst case scenario is this, I would suggest. Right? The worst case scenario is this. Imagine you weren't owned by one master. Imagine a group of farmers from up the hills there, right? Couldn't afford a slave each, so they decided to band together and buy one slave between 5 of them. And imagine you are that slave. Imagine you are one slave owned by 5 masters. And each one is telling you to do something different. Now you tell me, how's your life going to be? Honestly. What do you think your life is going to be like? A slave owned by many masters. What's it going to be like? Huh? That's pretty much hell, right? It's as pretty much as unpleasant life as you can imagine. But I would suggest that already is your life. That's already is your life. See if this sounds familiar. My wife wants me to do this. My kids want me to do that. My boss at work tells me I should do this. Right? My friends who don't really like my wife, they want me to do something different. And me, myself, I don't feel like doing any of those things. I want to do something else altogether. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like the life of many of us? Slaves owned by many masters, each one telling us to do something different. And you admitted that's hell. That's a horrible life. Or is this a better situation? Imagine this. Imagine you are a slave to one master. And this master, by the way, is just, merciful, compassionate, forgiving, kind, generous. In fact, this master will only ever tell you to do something because that thing is good for you. Because in fact, this master needs absolutely nothing from you whatsoever. And if you didn't get it already, that is the example or the similitude of the one who is a slave to God and those people who are slaves to other than God. This is why the one who chooses to submit to God lives a truly happy, blissful life. Slavery, you can't avoid it. You're going to be a slave to someone or something, even if it's to your own desires. Right? But most of us, in reality, we are slaves to many masters. Each one telling us to do something different. Being a Muslim is supposed to, I'm not saying every Muslim is like this, but being a Muslim means that you have chosen to be a slave to one master. It doesn't mean that you don't do things to make your wife happy or your kids happy or your boss happy or your mum. It doesn't mean that. Of course you do. But actually you only do it because God has told you to do that, and you only do it within the parameters of what God has ordered you to do. No human being would have the right as a Muslim to order you to do something that is disobedience to God. And when we say Islam means peace, that is really a true, profound sense of peace. We don't mean by peace here merely an absence of war. Most of us think peace means an absence of war. No. Because actually you could be at war and fighting, but still have peace within yourself. Right? Sometimes even the only way to feel at peace within yourself may be to defend your family, to defend your property. So real peace, the true peace, is an inner condition. exists inside one's heart and within one's mind and one's soul. So yes, it is true to say that Islam means peace, but it means peace in a profound, deep, spiritual, mental sense. So we could say that Islam means peace through a willing submission to God. And that's what the religion of Islam essentially and primarily is about. And then if we look at the teachings, the actual things that Muslims do, it is a discipline. It's a spiritual and mental discipline. Why do we pray 5 times a day? At specific times. Because it means that we have a life that is, if you think about it, if you pray 5 times a day at specific times spread throughout, it is impossible except that you will have a God-centered life, because you are constantly centering your life upon your relationship and your connection with the Creator of the heavens and the earth. We fast to learn to control our desires and our appetites, that we don't just surrender and give. And this is very important. Learning self-control, learning self-discipline, knowing that you don't have to give in to every whim and every desire. And you learn that when you fast. You abstain from food and drink and sexual intercourse from dawn until sunset every day for the whole of that month. We give a minimum of 2.5% of our excess wealth to the poor and the needy. Teaches us our connection with other human beings, the importance of caring for our brothers and sisters in humanity, to look after the poor and the needy, to remove from us stinginess and miserliness. And then that universal practice of Hajj, that amazing experience, if anyone's been there, where you meet with people of every different color, every different language that you can imagine, but all of them dressed in 2 pieces of cloth. They could be kings, they could be paupers, they could be anything, but everyone is dressed in these 2 pieces of unsewn cloth. And they present themselves to God, in front of God, the Creator, to worship Him. And it stresses that universal brotherhood and sisterhood that the human beings have. So, apart from those things, what are the basic teachings of Islam? You know what they are? It's very simple. Speak the truth and don't lie. It's one of the most important things. Always to be truthful. The Quran, how truthful should you be? You should be truthful even if it's against yourself, against your own family. Be just and speak the truth. This is what the Quran tells us. To keep your promises, to fulfill your trusts. Don't just be good to your neighbor. It's not enough just being good to your neighbor. The Prophet told us how we should be good to your neighbor. The Prophet Muhammad said, he is not a person who believes in God, whose stomach is full while his neighbor is hungry. See, believing in God is not just believing that there's a creator. It has consequences. It needs to transform the way you behave. A person who truly believes in God, truly believes that God has given us guidance, would never have a full stomach and their neighbor, because they care about their neighbor. That's so fundamental. Caring about the environment and the society and the human beings around you, whether they are Muslim or not. It's impossible that you could be a believer in Allah and God and the last day, and you cause mischief and you disturb your neighbor. Disobeying your parents, how should you respect them? The Quran says, do not even go, Don't even go, And you know, the scholar said, if there was something less than, God would have said, don't say that to your parents. Especially your mother. Especially, what is the status of the mother? How dare people say Islam gives women a low status? Please study for yourself the status of the mother in Islam. The respect. The Prophet Muhammad said, paradise lies at her feet, meaning serving your mother is the road to paradise. And the Prophet Muhammad said, you could never pay your mother back. You could pay your father back. You know how you could pay your father back? If you found your father was a slave, you bought him and set him free, you'd pay him back. Your mother, you can't. There's nothing you can do. Nothing. A man came to one of the Muslim caliphs who was a companion of the Prophet Muhammad. He said, "Oh Umar," this was his name, the ruler of the Muslims. He was carrying his mother on his back through Hajj. Hajj is like 5 days in the desert, in the heat. You have to travel from Mecca to Mina to Arafah. It's like 13, 16 kilometers. He carried his mother on the back. 3 days. He said, "Did I pay her back now?" He said, "You didn't pay her back for one tear she shed when she gave birth to you." That's what our religion teaches about respecting women, especially mothers. These are the essential teachings of Islam. To be just, to speak the truth, to enjoin what is right and to forbid what is wrong. Is there anything there that people could truly find objectionable? These are the fundamental teachings. Everything else really is decoration on that. And these are the basic core principles. So I really thank you. I'm privileged, really, privileged that you have given me the opportunity to explain something about this religion to you. I hope that it has given you a little bit more of an understanding of what Islam is really about. May God bless all of you. May God bless me. May God guide us all closer to the truth. And may His peace and blessings be upon all of you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
Jazakallah, thank you, Sheikh, for that presentation. What we'd like to do now is open the session up for those that are brave enough. You've got pens and paper on your tables, and if you want to ask a question, we're going to have a roving mic for those that want to start off with asking a question. For those that want to ask a question, a piece of paper, please hand it to the colleagues who'll be walking around, and hopefully Sheikh will answer some of these questions. Pens and paper on the tables, and if you want to ask a question, we're going to have a roving mic for those that want to start off with asking a question. It always takes one brave person to stand up and start off. So who's going to be the first one? Walking around, and hopefully Sheikh will answer some of these questions. It always takes one brave person to stand up and start off. So who's going to be the first one?
I wasn't expecting that. Oh gosh, okay. I really don't want to, because I might launch into another lecture, you see. Gosh, what can I say? I sort of brought up a Roman Catholic. My dad is an agnostic, still is. My mother's Roman Catholic, sort of. She's originally Polish, my mother. Before I was even born, my mother had registered me. She must have been convinced that I was going to be a boy, to go to a school, quite a well-known monastic boarding school called Ampleforth College. So that's where I was educated. It's in Yorkshire, over the other side. Yeah. That's where I went to school. So that was my upbringing. Yeah. But I had lots of questions about Christianity, lots of things about Christian doctrine, more than, when I say Christianity, I mean Christian doctrine, that just didn't sit well in my mind. What did it mean, Mary, Mother, Hail Mary, Mother of God? How does God have a mother? I just remember when my mum was teaching me that. What do you mean God has a mother? God's supposed to be the creator of everything. I just thought, well, maybe Mary's a bigger God than God. She gave birth to him. So it was like questions like that I never really found satisfying answers to, that led me to look through different religions. And also, I guess the big question, what is the purpose of life? Why are we here? What's it all for? I was really trying to think, what is the purpose of our existence? Because I really just couldn't believe that we were just here to, make money and, just enjoy our life, and that was it. There had to be something more to life than that. Like I said, I studied many religions, I think, but to cut the whole long story short, the thing that ultimately made me decide that I would, become Muslim was reading a translation of the Quran. So When I read a translation of the Quran, then I became very much convinced that, initially it was like, from all the books that I had studied, from all the religions that I had studied, I said to myself, if there is a book that is from God, this is the one. And that's really, I guess, when I started my journey inside Islam. Yeah. So that's very brief summary of how. If you're interested in the 40-minute lecture, just go on YouTube and you can find it there. Type in my name, Abdur Raheem Green, and you can find it, inshallah. So any other questions? Excellent. Yes. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Right. Right, okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder what you think about that, because we would love to engage more with an Asian community, but all of this language, it's not ours.
Yeah.
It's probably not yours either. It's actually Arts Council language, or it's not therefore a council language. But I think my question is about how do we present projects in a way that would interest, and I guess how do we open ourselves to projects that might be of interest for us to present, or for us to engage with arts.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how we remove that sort of element from it and just open up engagement between arts and community.
Okay, I mean, specifically in respect to the Muslim community, right? I think the thing here is that there is a strong tradition of arts within the civilizational, Islam civilizationally, yeah? But that tradition has largely, it's very interesting, right? The single highest peak of artistic expression, if you like that, to use that for want of another term, right? Is what you heard today at the beginning, is the recitation of the Quran. The recitation of the Quran is a science. It's an art form. There are people who literally, from a young age, study almost nothing except this art of reciting the Quran. Every single the pause between this sound and that sound, how long this particular letter goes, how this one joins with that, how the intonation is, it's literally studied. Yeah? And it's considered within Islamic civilization that is the peak. Yeah? And it is an art form. Of course it is art. Yeah? But it's obviously devotional art in a very particular form. Right? And that the whole belief system in Islam also really defines the parameters of what is acceptable in terms of art or not, right? And one of of course, the controversial issues is about the use of images, right? And it's not quite understood about why Islamic art. If I say to you Islamic art, most people will know what I mean. They know that it's sets of geometric patterns, right? Maybe with flowers and trees, right? But in a highly symbolized form, right? But almost, and also the study of calligraphy, yeah? But definitely Islamic art, what defines it is the absence of images of human beings and animals, right? There's a reason for that. And the reason is based upon a principle in the religion that the things that lead to evil are evil. Right? So it's not a question only of Islam of don't do this and don't do that. You find also the Quran teaches us don't go near the things that might lead you to those bad things. Right? And although ultimately, the problem with portraying human beings and animals is that historically it has led to idolatry. That's one reason. It's a path, and especially, by the way, when those images come to be included in religious buildings, then they often become themselves objects of worship, and that people pray to them and use them as they imagine as intercessors between them and God, which is what is idolatry. It's considered to be idolatry, right? In Islam, one directs one's prayers and supplications directly to God, not through Jesus or Muhammad or any saint. It is a direct communication to God. And to pray to anyone or anything else is considered to be spiritually the worst crime. Right? Because God wants us to communicate with Him. God does not want us to use intermediaries. The other reason, and this is a bit more subtle, is that God has certain attributes that are unique to God. Any human being who claims to possess any of those unique attributes actually sets himself up as an equal or a rival to God. It doesn't mean they're saying, I am God. But here's an easy one to understand. If I said, I know everything, and I mean it, I know everything. I don't mean it as a sort of thing. There is not one piece of knowledge that I don't know. That would mean I am claiming an attribute that only belongs to God. I may not claim to be the creator of the universe, but by claiming absolute knowledge, I claim an aspect of divinity. Right? So an aspect of unique quality that belongs to God is the ability to create something out of nothing. And the thing here is the artist who makes a picture of an animal or a human being, whether it's with paint or out of stone, right? They are taking, in a sense, nothing, right, and trying to make it lifelike. And that is something, or almost trying to bring it to life. Yeah? And that is imitating a unique quality of God. That is claiming, in a sense, right? So it has a very dangerous spiritual effect that a person may begin to believe they are some sort of creator in a way that is only unique to God. So this is why it's also problematic. But art, apart from that, abstract art, okay, is not a problem. Okay, poetry as well, by the way, is also traditionally a very well respected art form, especially in Arab culture and, by the way, Urdu culture as well, right? So I think that when engaging with the Muslim community in terms of art, it would be good to think about those paradigms and those parameters. Yeah, there are things that are controversial, like plays and acting and stuff like that. Music's generally controversial. There's, different opinions. The strong orthodox opinion about musical instruments being that, the majority of musical instruments are not allowed. This is the orthodox opinion. There are other opinions, but this is the orthodox. But singing is allowed, and the use of drums is allowed. So acting as well, this is controversial. So that there are realms that, there's a whole discourse going on about it, right? So I think it is helpful to, when you want to engage with the Muslim community, to understand these parameters. It's going to make you a lot easier to engage with them. But I think the guys have a positive start. You have a project, right? Canvas, what was it called? Crafty Canvas, yeah? And some really impressive pictures. Hopefully it would be nice if you'd bought some of them, right? Really nice artwork, crafty. So I think you need to talk to Shahan at the back there, yeah, and talk about the project they're already working on, yeah. Okay, great. Anything else? Don't be afraid. No one's going to chop your head off or anything like that. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm wondering how, from your perspective, from a Muslim perspective, how you see the other Abrahamic faiths.
Yeah.
Do we actually have a lot more similar than there is to deny? Or are the other religious things having misformed or off the rails?
Well, yeah,
Perspective from the enemy.
it's a good question. It's an excellent question. Excellent question. First of all, the term that the Quran uses is Ahl al-Kitab, which means people of the book. All right? So I'd rather stick to that term. The people of the book are Jews and Christians. Right? And there is no doubt from reading the Quran and from looking and studying from the life of the Prophet Muhammad that there was, first of all, certainly the Prophet Muhammad himself had a very great expectation that the people of the book would accept that what he was saying. But I think that was also met by a great disappointment that many of them didn't. But certainly the Quran defines a very special and close relationship between the Muslims and the people of the book, because they are all people of the book. But the reason for this relationship is primarily based upon, of course, there are commonalities. There is the monotheistic concept. Although it is considered that Christians spoil that monotheistic concept by believing that Jesus is God, but the basic idea of a supreme being who is different from the creation is there. And of course it is very similar in the Jewish belief to the Muslim belief, right? But I think the main important thing is the moral code. And not only the fact of there being a moral code, but a moral code that is written in a book, and therefore is very difficult to subjugate to radical change, right? So it's the fact that there is a book that is a point of reference in terms of a moral code that is very, very important. Yeah? And that's actually the basis of a society. Because the moral code is very similar, it is very easy for Muslims and Jews and Christians to live together within the context of society. And that is why historically you find, really in civilizational terms of human history, Muslim Spain until now is a paradigm of pluralistic society where Muslims, Jews and Christians lived together extremely effectively and had a very effective social order, right? It still today stands up as an amazing example. But not only Muslim Spain, in fact, also you find throughout Islamic history, Baghdad as well, throughout history. No doubt there were times when this relationship became more fragile, when the people of the book were not really treated, but those treated so well. But those instances are actually quite rare in Islamic history. And the reason is a commonality of beliefs and a commonality of especially social and moral norms. And those things are very important to build an effective society. If you have moral values that are too different, you'll see that it's very, very hard to have a cohesive society. It's very, very hard. All right? And to be honest, there is a point. In a liberal society, in a secular liberal society, not only is it hard to see how Muslims fit in, but it's also hard to see how any serious Jew or Christian fits in as well. Right? And serious practicing Christians are having real problems with some of the secular liberal values that are being forced upon religious people. Right? And that's it, because we have a code of conduct that we believe is immutable. You can't mess around with it. You can't change it because life is more modern, right? They're supposed to be absolute values of morality, right? So, this is a very interesting discussion, but certainly that connection, and I actually think that serious Muslims and serious Jews and serious Christians are going to find more and more in common, and more common cause. And it's already happening, because our language is the same language. You find a lot of Christians. I even got an email recently from a very strong practicing Catholic who was disagreeing with some of the stuff that I said, obviously about Jesus and this and that, but on the other hand was saying, you know, some of the stuff I said about Abraham and about obeying God, he was telling his son the stuff from my speeches, yeah, and said, you know, we totally agree on these things, yeah. So yes, there is that common. I think the thing about Abraham is we all recognize he's the one that we all recognize, yeah, as being the patriarch. So that's why the term Abrahamic faiths, because every Jew, Muslim and Christian looks at Abraham as a type of paradigm, as a type of example for us all to follow of a man who truly was devoted to God. Yeah. Thanks. Okay, anything else? Yeah, I don't think I'm going to answer. It's a bit of a tricky question. Yeah. I'll think about this one. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I'm not wearing a hat at all, you know. No. That's a good question. It's a really excellent question. So the question, if you didn't hear it, is about the different hats, and is it a sign of, for example, hierarchy, you know, within the mosque or the church? Okay, first of all, you know, one of the things about Islam is we don't have a priesthood. There is no official hierarchy, yeah, in the religion. Okay? From the religious point of view, a person is respected because of their piety and because of their knowledge. But there is no, how can I say, there is no official hierarchy. There's no official gradation, right? There is, of course, the imam of the mosque, right? And he is the person who leads the prayer. But the imam should be the person who has memorized most Quran, is able to recite it in the most beautiful way, and should be the person who is the most knowledgeable in the community. He may not be, but he should be, right? Anyone can be an imam, in fact. I could be an imam, right? And at home, I'm the imam of my family. I lead my family in prayer. Or if I'm not there, my son leads the family in prayer. But apart from that, we don't have a religious hierarchy. The different hats, okay, are different styles from different countries. Yeah. Traditionally in Muslim culture, from the time of the Prophet Muhammad, for a man to cover his head was considered to be like it used to be in England once upon a time. When I remember my dad, when he used to go to work in the city, had to wear a bowler hat. You could not work in the city without a bowler hat and a suit, usually a three-piece suit and an umbrella. That was the dress. You could not be seen in the city without your bowler hat. Right now people go in jeans and t-shirt and whatever, but that's the way it used to be. Now it is important, you know, in Islam, you know, that one should, you know, it's part of a tradition in Muslim culture. It's not part of the religion, but it's a part of the cultural practice, right? That for a man to wear a hat is considered in most Muslim countries, right, to be a respectful way to dress. Yeah, I don't wear a hat in England because English people don't really consider that respectful or disrespectful or anything, right? It's not important in British society, right? But if I was in a place where it was considered to be appropriate dress, then I should dress appropriately, because it's not correct for a Muslim to look or behave like a dishonorable or a bad person. You should always present the best manners and the best type of dress. Yeah. So the hats don't mean anything, they're just different styles. So sometimes I can identify a person, maybe there's different styles of hat, right? For example, people who come from East Africa, like Tanzania, Kenya, Somali, Oman even. I know Oman's not in East Africa, but with the Omanis have a connection with them. They have a particular style of hat that's quite easy to identify, right? In Pakistan, they have several different styles of hat, right? Okay, and so on and so forth. So it's something to do connected with the culture. As for the woman covering her hair, then no, that is a religious requirement. That's something in the Quran right? And the Quran actually mentions that the believing women should wear the khimar. And the khimar means in Arabic, the word khimar means in Arabic a scarf that comes over the chest and just shows the face. Yeah. So that is something that mentions when they're in public, in front of strange men, meaning someone who's not their husband or their father or their uncle or their grandfather or their brothers, they don't have to wear the head scarf in front of those people. But in front of strange men or non-close relatives, the women need to cover their hair. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, it's fine. You're quite welcome to. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. I could find you the reference, right? If you want, yeah, it's in Matthew. I think it's in the Gospel of Matthew, and I can find. If I had my computer with me, I could bring you a whole series. I did recently. I have been giving a series of lectures on this whole topic. Jesus. It's about Jesus. More than a carpenter, less than God. It's very interesting that in the 1960s, a group of theologians from the Anglican Church got together and they actually wrote a book called The Myth of God Incarnate. And it was a very, very hugely controversial book. But basically, these Anglican theologians quite frankly discussed, but in rather high-flung theological language, the idea that Jesus was actually God in any real sense was an idea that has been imposed upon the Gospels rather than it's an idea that comes naturally from the Gospels, right? So there are many references within the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that make it clear that Jesus differentiated himself from God, right? You're absolutely right. There are lots of, and this is a whole topic of biblical, how did the Bible that we have come to be here, right? How did the canonical Gospels come to be chosen as the canonical Gospels? It's a very big and interesting topic. I'm personally interested in it, but it's way more than what we could deal with here. But I mean, the point of view here as Muslims, right, is that our information, of course, comes primarily from the Quran, right? It does primarily come from the Quran. And because we believe the Quran is the word of God, right, we do believe that Jews and Christians have truth in their books. But we also believe that those books have become, the pure books have become lost and distorted over time. Sometimes through translation, sometimes through certain things being excluded, sometimes through things being added, sometimes things that were footnotes were included as text. And actually all of these things are borne out by honest biblical scholarship. So Muslims generally believe the Bible, for example, or the texts that the Jews and the Christians have, because there's not only the Bible, I mean the Jews as well, they have the Talmud, for example, but those texts have truth in them, but we don't believe that they are reliable on their own. In fact, one of the names that the Quran is given is Al-Furqan, which means the criterion. It decides what is right and wrong from the previous scriptures, and that's part of the reason why we believe God revealed the Quran, to sort out these arguments that are going on about the nature of Jesus, about the nature of scripture, and so on and so forth. Yeah, but I'd be more than happy if you want, to share with you the information that I have. I'd be more than happy, at a later time. I just think right here is probably not the best time to do it. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
My mother would say, well, why? Is there any reference to this in the Bible from Christianity?
Yeah. I think the point is that you know, the issue is whether there is from the Bible or not, yeah, you know, is not so relevant from the you know, I mean, the thing that I would say to your mum is, okay, let's discuss. Do you believe in God? Is there a God or not? If you believe in God, okay, is God one? Right? Do you believe Jesus is God? Let's discuss that. And if she believes that no, a human being can't be God, there is one God, okay, shall we discuss whether the Quran is from God? Because ultimately that's the deciding factor. Right? Whether the Bible has references or not is not really relevant. The relevant thing is a simple question. Is the Quran from God or not? Is Muhammad a prophet or not? If the Quran is from God and if Muhammad is the prophet, then okay, accept what God says. That's logical, isn't it? Right? And that's really the discussion that we should be having with people. Right? You know, otherwise, you know, I don't think we should be necessarily, as Muslims, trying to teach other people their religion. You understand, right? You know, as a Christian, you should be doing this. And I mean, I have that argument with my mum all the time, but I did have quite a strong Catholic education. The funny thing is my mum calls herself a Catholic, but she doesn't believe in half the stuff that the Catholic Church teaches. I keep saying, you're supposed to be a Catholic, mum. You're not supposed to do that, you know? You know, I have that argument with her all the time, you know. But I think that's the main factor. Yeah.
Can we just take, I'm sorry about the time, but obviously
Yeah.
we're going to probably the supper's ready as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
One last question for Sheikh.
Oh, it's
One last one.
going to be a long one probably. That's a very good question. Yes. There are two sources of information from which Muslims they take their religion, right? One is the Quran, but another is the practical example and practice of the Prophet Muhammad, yeah, which is called the Sunnah. So the Prophet Muhammad, you know, for example, the Quran does not really teach us many details of how to pray. It says pray, it has some details, but most of what Muslims know about how to pray is not to be found in the Quran. It's to be found in the practical example and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, what the Prophet Muhammad said and what he did is not found in one book. It's found in a collection of many books. And these are called the books of hadith. Right? And those are, you could say, also complementary sources of information. And it's a good question because you often find in the newspapers or on the TV, and it always frustrates me. They say, well, Muslims say this, but it's not anywhere in the Quran. As if the only source of reference for Muslims about the religion was the Quran. And this is itself saying that is a very ignorant statement about the religion of Islam. So thank you very much for bringing that up because, of course, the Prophet Muhammad's example, he is in a sense the living Quran. He is the living example of how to implement the Quran. And so that example, which was preserved by the early Muslims and written down by them, and then ultimately compiled in various books, they are also an important source for us about the religion of Islam. Yeah. I think that was the last. Oh. I refer him back to the question, right? That at the end of the day, the real important question is a simple question. Is the Quran from God? Is Muhammad the Prophet of God? Right? If you can accept that, well, accept whatever the Quran says. Right? God is wise, certainly much more wise than us. Yeah? And this is the important thing. You know, why this, why that, why don't we eat pork, why is it true that this and that? You know, these are actually secondary things. What is that in compared to the essential question? I mean, put it this way. If Muhammad is not a prophet, and if the Quran is not from God, what do you care what it says? What do you care what some guy living in the desert 1,400 years ago said? Right? What does it matter? It only matters because we believe he's a prophet of God. It only matters because we believe the Quran is from God. If it's not from God, it doesn't matter. If it is, then it matters a lot. And that's the important question, not these secondary subjects of why this and why that, and so on and so forth.
Just like to highlight the importance of the presentation today. I think it's definitely enlightened for myself as well, some understanding, deeper understanding of Islam, and I'm sure that it's enlightened yourself and hopefully broken down some of the misconceptions that communities hold about Muslims. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the people involved with arranging this event here tonight. It's been a very good turnout, and for those people that are here today who's taken out their evening time to be here to listen to Brother Sheikh, who's come from London, to present to us the Islamic side and the Muslim community that we have. And I hope today you'll make the most of this opportunity to network with people sat on your tables, and hopefully this will continue to happen over the years to come. So Jazakallah khair, and thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the evening supper that's going to be served in the next couple of minutes. Thank you very much.